सर मैम को कॉल करें। क्या हो, क्या लिंक भेजनी है? भेजू मैं?
Rupa, hello. Rupa, can you hear me?
Yeah, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
See my screen?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, your screen is clearly visible.
No, the presentation.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. So I'll just start once you are ready. So
Okay.
I'll share the screen.
Okay,
Right?
okay, ma'am.
Because
Yes, ma'am.
I'll find it more convenient.
Okay, ma'am.
So just let me know once you're ready.
Okay, ma'am. तुम्हारी आवाज नहीं आ रही है। एक मिनट मैं देती हूँ, रुको। हैंड्स फ्री दो तुमको मैं, मेरे पास एक एक्स्ट्रा है। ये दिस इज कंफर्टेबल नॉबर्ट, ये लो।
हेलो। Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone.
नहीं इसी से
यही है, मुझे इतना दिखेगा.
So, ma'am, shall we start?
Yes, I think we should start. Has everybody come?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Screen बड़ा नहीं होगा?
Rupa, just let me know when I have to start sharing my screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, ma'am.
You don't have to raise screen. तब भी नहीं हो.
इतना ही है सर.
चलो कोई.
ये रिस्टोर्ड सही.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I, Dr. Norbert Solomon, on behalf of Department of Humanities, welcome you all to the English webinar series, Lecture 1. We have the august presence of Professor Dr. Upinder Dhar, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sri Vaishnav Vidyapeeth Vishwavidyalaya, Indore, Dr. Santosh Dhar, Dean, Faculty of Doctoral Studies and Research, and Coordinator of Sri Vaishnav Institute of Social Science, Humanities and Arts, and Dr. Seema Raizada, Professor, Department of English, MLB, Government Girls PG College, Bhopal, MP. Deliberation for today's webinar is about adaptation of literature into cinema. Q&A round will be open to the participants. They can post their questions in the YouTube link, and once the deliberation is complete, we will answer the responses. And feedback link will also be posted in Google in the YouTube chat section, which needs to be filled on the very same day before 11 p.m. I now request Dr. Santosh Dhar to brief us about the webinar series.
Honorable Vice Chancellor Dr. Upinder Dhar, our resource person Dr. Raizada, co-convener Dr. Rupa Shinde, coordinator Dr. Shilpa Phadnit, co-coordinator Dr. Norbert Solomon, HOIs and HODs of constituent institutes of the university, a warm welcome to English webinar series Lecture 1, Adaptation of Literature into Cinema. Works of literature have been adapted for films from the dawn of the industry. When adapting from literature to film, one begins with the raw stuff, the subject matter of a short story, novel, a play, history, biography, or a folk tale. It is all good because it is ready-made and market tested. The characters and stories are already popular. Now they have to be mass-produced. There are 3 types of adaptation, which they are followed: loose, faithful, or literal. Adaptation is by nature a translation into a different medium which expresses itself by using a different group of techniques, essential materials, and rules of creative harmony. Some of the earliest examples come from the work of George Melis, who pioneered many film techniques. In 1899, he released 2 adaptations, Cinderella, based on the Brothers Grimm story of the same name, and King John, the first known film to be based on the works of Shakespeare. The 1900 film Sherlock Holmes Baffled, directed by Arthur Marwood, featured Arthur Conan Doyle's detective character Sherlock Holmes intruding upon a pseudo-supernatural burglary. The film considered the first detective movie. In India, many films produced like Gone with the Wind, From Here to Eternity, The Godfather were all adapted from novels of the same theme. Short plays like Casablanca, Streetcar Named Desire, Equates were also adapted from stage plays. The Sacred Light of Walter Milty, Breakfast at Tiffany's, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter were all made from short stories. In India, many Hindi films were inspired from Bengali literature. Kabuliwala was inspired by Kabuliwala, written by Rabindranath Tagore. Parnita was based on Sharat Chandra Chattopadhyay. Devadas again was based on a novel by Sharat Chandra Chattopadhyay. Saha Bibi Gulam was based on a novel by Bimal Mitra. Pinjar, that movie that won the National Award for the Best Feature Film, was based on the novel written by Amrita Pritam. Even Blue Umbrella, written by Ruskin Bond, won the National Award for Best Children's Film. A good movie adaptation keeps the core storyline intact while improving on the elements that did not work in the story. Documentary cinema has a closer relation to history. Documentary can function like journalism, on the spot news, through news, only the rough draft of history. Conventional wisdom defines documentary as relating to or found in documents, aiming at presentation of reality, broadly, factual, objective. Film creates a fully defined and immediate physical reality that requires dramatization and exploration. It brings characters visually realized into direct relationship with their environment and in immediate proximity to the viewer. Students are often left with a double displacement when they read canonical literature. They don't share the historical movement that produced the text they are reading, which requires teachers to sit through not only textual meaning but also related historical context. At the same time, most canonical authors weren't writing text with adolescent readers in mind, not to mention differences between 19th century adolescents and the same age group today. Literature may hold an enshrined status in contemporary English classrooms, but many of the novels and plays we teach were created and circulated as forms of popular entertainment in their respective days. Curricula that ignore popular culture adaptations fail to acknowledge the value of introducing a well-known story in a medium better suited to introducing themes and annoying the interest of young readers. We believe that teaching adaptations and helping students to create new versions of older stories provides a productive platform for better understanding the value of now classic texts and their cultural relevance both in the past and in the present. Today's session, I'm sure, will definitely expand our horizons and understanding about it, enriching us and making us more knowledgeable. Thank you so much. Over to Norbert Solomon.
Thank you, ma'am, for apprising us with the details in a nutshell. Now I request Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Upinder Bhatt, for the welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon to everybody. Our learned speaker for this webinar, Dr. Seema Raizada, Coordinator Swisha, Dr. Mrs. Dar, my colleagues Norbert, Shilpa, Rupa, and all others, participants of this webinar. First of all, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you to this webinar organized by our institute called Swisha. In fact, Swisha is one such institute in our university which covers a very wide cross-section of disciplines, from social sciences to arts to other disciplines. I would like to congratulate the organizers of this webinar for choosing a very appropriate theme: adoption of literature into cinema. It is said that literature reflects the basic features of any culture. Literature is part and parcel of culture. If we have to understand the nuances of a culture, go through the literature available about that particular culture. So literature plays a very significant role in documenting the day-to-day experiences. And when same literature is adopted for a medium like films, we have greater access, we have greater reach to people. Everybody may not be interested in going through the literature, in going through the minor details of literature, but we have a wider audience when it comes to films. Therefore, adoption of literature facilitates us in letting people know more about the particular culture. Dean has already mentioned about number of films which were very well received by the viewers, but they were based actually on one or the other work in literature. So I very seriously believe that we can learn, we can draw learnings from the experiences and particularly from the imagination of a writer by either going through the literature, the original work, or by seeing the films. But here is a difference. Literature helps us to know the writings directly, the work done by a writer. Whereas in films, there is an additional element of dramatization, because we cannot hold the attention of viewers if that element of dramatization is not there. In a film, there are many people who are involved. In addition to the writer of the script or the work that has been adopted for cinema. So there are actors, there is a director, there is some producer, then there is a technical people who are involved in cinematography and so on and so forth. So there is a bigger team when it comes to cinema. Number one. Number two, it is also said many times, it is said that every piece of literature cannot be adopted into cinema. But then there are works which have been very skillfully adopted and very well, have also been very well received by the viewers. So therefore, this subject is very important, irrespective of the culture. Whether we talk about Indian culture or Western culture, talk of any culture, literature plays a pivotal role in giving us an idea about the culture of that particular country or society. So this gives me a lot of confidence that through this webinar, when we have a very learned scholar with us who will be apprising us about the minor details of this transformation from just a piece of literature to cinema. Cinema is also widely recognized as a medium, but then what are the minute details, minute nuances involved in the transformation process? And getting more readership on one hand, also getting more viewership on the other hand. So with these words, I'm happy to inaugurate this webinar. And once again, I would like to extend warm welcome to our resource person, Dr. Seema Raizada. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your encouraging words. Now I invite Dr. Rupa Shinde, HOD, Sri Vaishnav Institute of Social Sciences, Humanities and Arts, to introduce us to the resource person, Dr. Seema Raizada.
I am profusely elated to take an opportunity to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Seema Raizada. Dr. Raizada is a professor of English at Maharani Lakshmi Government Girls Postgraduate College, Bhopal. She has been teaching English language and literature for the last 33 years. She is a Shakespeare scholar who has her PhD and DLit degrees on the works of the Bard and also authored a book titled Double Vision of Shakespeare. She is a resource person and subject expert for trainees at the RCPV Narona Academy of Administration, Bhopal. She is the founder of Club Literati, which is an exclusive platform for both established and budding writers and artists, and all those who love to explore literature and other creative arts. She is Program Director of Skill Employability Program for MLB College since 2018. She is also an executive member of Bhopal chapter of English Language Teachers Association of India. Also a subject expert on Board of Studies to several institutions. She started Shakespeare Festival in 2013 and directed performances in 2017 and 18 at Bharat Bhavan. She has also delivered lectures on cinema and stage performance at Bharat Bhavan. She has also written columns on women-centric issues. She has also received appreciation for her contribution in the fields of literature and youth welfare. It is my privilege to invite Dr. Seema Raizada to share her knowledge and wisdom with us. Over to you, ma'am.
Now I hand over the session to Dr. Seema Raizada for her discourse. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Mr. Dar, and the organizers of this webinar series. I'm indeed grateful to the organizers for having invited me for this inaugural webinar series. It was a very exhaustive introduction by Ms. Dar and very insightful introductory remarks by Honorable Vice Chancellor. And we all agree that cinema has made a lot of difference. It's a vital part of our culture and lives. And that is why we are talking here about literature and cinema. We all read and appreciate literature, and we all watch and enjoy cinema. Both have their distinctive pleasures and approaches to appreciation. We read books of different genres and feel enriched or disappointed, as the case may be. The same applies to cinema. But do we approach the film in the same way we would read the book if the story is the same? How do we perceive the same story presented in two different media? Suddenly, a lot happens when the medium is changed. So, literature, we all know what constitutes literature. Literature is the entire body of writings of a specific language, period, people, the kind of expressions, the form, the ideas, that of course, and they generally do in all good literature, they always have a universal value. So, written works, literature, if we look at the definition of literature, what is that? Literature is the written works in which there is expression of form, and of course we have several genres which we know as poetry, drama, fiction, non-fiction. There's history. There's non-fiction which comprises biography, autobiographies, essays. Now this is what constitutes literature broadly. The human history is full of this treasure of words found in all possible languages across countries. And this is where we have a whole treasure of words in the form of books, whatever the genre may be. And therefore, we find that literature becomes a ubiquitous raw material for perhaps a more popular and attractive and fertile source of entertainment in the hands of technology. So since the time when cinema started its journey, we have literature getting adapted to the screen. Adaptation from such diverse genres of literature such as fiction, non-fiction, and other, even comics, historical sources. So that is what has made filmmaking a very exciting and rich experience. Now, when you come to look at the definition of adaptation. What exactly is adaptation? What happens when we say that the books are adapted into a certain medium? So that is the process of adapting any artistic work. It could be anything, any form of art from a different medium. And that is what, which includes, which is rather applied to a wide variety of theatrical and screen applications. And what happens here? There is some transformation or transmutation that takes place. So all the elements of the medium are reinforced to achieve the end result as a brand new production. So that is why we find, when the books are adapted, and when you go and watch a movie, you find sometimes you're not able to relate, unless somebody tells you that this film is based on certain book. But there's no denying the fact that when we read a book, our imagination runs parallel to every description. We all human beings, we have a gift of our own creativity and imagination. So the prospect of adaptation excites us because what was till now in our imagination will now be possibly seen on stage or screen. But then we have enjoyed a book, reading a book greatly. It's, as they say, unputdownable book. And we have loved that book. And we know that there is a movie that is going to be, screened shortly based on that book. So now the question is, does our expectation meet well with the adaptation when we go and watch that movie? Or are we left cheated? So there are good chances that the appropriated sources get misrepresented, since the process of adaptation invariably involves change. There's a lot of assimilation, and in that process, there is a lot of misappropriation. So cinema brings these, these works, or what we can say, these are all narrative media. So just like literature, cinema is also a narrative media. And by and large, therefore, film is considered as a branch of literature. You have now, in various universities, you have a whole paper, a program on film appreciation. So film is very much a part of literature now. It's an extension of an the older narrative arts. But then again, now what happens when two different media, language and film, they come to tell the same story? So it's a very normal thing to hear people coming out of the theater after having watched a movie based on their favorite book and saying, I didn't like the book. I didn't like the cinema. I didn't like the movie. And, it was a bad experience for me. It should not have been adapted in this fashion. So there are several views. But then the book may not be sometimes as good as the cinema. So it is a kind of, it goes, it is true for any book as well, that the book may not be sometimes very good as the cinema has made it to be. So when it comes to the relationship between film and literature, it dates back to the beginnings of cinema itself. And ever since then, there has been a dialogue, there has been this argument over issues of legitimacy and aesthetics. The uniqueness of each medium is understood if we are able to decipher, as Vice Chancellor Saab just told us that, it is how we come to know the nuances of this art. So that is where we have to look for these little, changes or the transformation or the transmutation. So what happens is that there is some complexity as far as the concept or the subtlety of the way the things are articulated, the way the ideas are articulated. So whether the complexities or the articulation is appropriate to that medium, then maybe we have to look at even this way, that the experience of either reading or watching a cinema, they have their own distinctive qualities for their very distinctive or respective audiences. And the different contexts of production, the different way they are received, and the way the entire the production process, the outcome, and the response, they are circulated. So all these become very vital when we appreciate cinema. And then how all these factors, they in turn affect the interpretation and finally the judgment. So we have to remember this fact that cinema will have a little benefit of the oral, which is the power of hearing. We can hear, there is sound, and of course there is the visual. So cinema is a very vital force. We all know that it is something which engages our attention, our response to our not only our own lives, our own society, but it's a very global experience. And as rightly mentioned, it is something which has brought the entire world. So it has made the world accessible. So when you come to talk about the adaptation, what we know as a cinematic adaptation, one thing we have to, we all would acknowledge when we read a book, any good author will not leave the meaning or the sentences very straight. There are layers. That's the beauty of literature. So literature has layers of meaning that helps filmmaking varied, full of varied nuances. So that is a big advantage, I would say, that the filmmakers will have if they adapt books of written by great authors, and will and have earned their reputation, and they will still being read after several years, maybe centuries after they were written. So one very important concept that comes through this conversation about this talk about literature and film, that film adaptation is a dialogic process. That is something continuous. it goes on. So when we talk about literary adaptations, we know that these, the adaptations, when the books are turned into movies, that bridges the gap between literature and cinema. So initially, what linked these two modes of expression was how the adapted movie remained loyal to the source text. Now, that's a very important question, and it's something which have been contested for a very very long time, and still, as I mentioned, I mean, we don't find the books according to our our perception. So we feel disappointed in the fact that there was so many, probably the characters were left out, or certain beautiful description which we read in a book, they had no parallel in the cinema. So, however, with this kind of fidelity criticism, it's a very important concept in film, in the concept of film adaptation, that how far the cinema has remained loyal in adaptation. So that is something which we call fidelity. So Robert Stam, the American film theorist, in his article Beyond Fidelity, the Dialogics of Adaptation, he said he did not accept this view. He rejected this view, and he said that the literary text is not a closed source. It's an open structure, and it has to be kind of reworked. And that is what I think the word, which is very important in terms of our imagination, in terms of our ethos, that's something which can be reworked without boundaries. So this concept is it's a very it's a very kind of which probably helps us to become a little more generous in accepting the movies, even if they are not very very close to the essence of the text that we have loved. So this dialogic process, which is a process of continual dialogue, and continual dialogue means that we talk about it continuously. We keep experimenting it. We keep interacting with the previous information which is available to us. And it's not that we have we fix everything in one design, and we have a formula for that. No, it has to be continuous. So it has to be something dynamic in that sense. Yes. So that is what Robert Stam insisted on, and that is the reason why the directors they keep returning to the familiar texts. Now we have seen even Ms. Dar mentioned about this. There are so many books that have been adapted over the years and been adapted. I mean, if of course, I'll give you examples later in the presentation, that how many times one singular text has been adapted. So that is something which will bring us close to that fact that if something is written well and engages the imagination of people, of readers, of viewers, then it is going to live. And that is what is meant, when we say that it's not a closed, it's not a closed, idea, or it has, there should not be any boundaries to that. So that is how both literature and cinema would remain alive. Now, and of course they would keep looking back and forth. That is the beauty. It's not just looking, accepting something what is there in the text. It's not that we would be always be fascinated what is there for us as a modern society. We will also look back, not only back but forth. What is to come in future? Maybe really futuristic. So of course we have those sci-fis, but then even if you're reading any kind of literature, not in that category, that has to imbibe something of that might happen, and that is what will keep the doors open. and always afresh means to speak the old texts in new times. So this is I began by stating that literature has this advantage because it has layers of meanings, and that keeps the doors of interpretation open. And we have situations, and where the text get we have examples where the text gets situated in various conditions in different countries with the same character. You can find the same character living in in cinema. That the same character would be shown in any part of India or anywhere else in the world. So this is very, very significant that we have not to not be very, very you know kind of believe in kind of compartmentalization. So that is what is important. And then one very big advantage to cinema is that the experience is immediate, and because it offers something which we do not get to see in the book. For example, you have those the cinematography, the high angle establishing, the shots, and the close-ups. Then you can see the expressions on the face of the characters. You can see the minute details, the kind of body language, the subtle interactions, etc. So all these things, that they are very, very big advantages that cinema has. And that is what we lead us to go to the theaters, come what may, and enjoy the movie. So what happens when the book is translated or transformed or adapted to screen? Now, I'll just present three views quickly. By the first one, as you can see, is by Virginia Woolf, great critic. Now, she was a little, very, very rigid sometimes. She in this regard, she has very restricted views when she says that, when the cinema in that classic essay, The Cinema, which was published in 1926, she says the results are disastrous. And she calls the staging, the book being adapted to cinema as an unnatural alliance. And then she very clearly says that while the book has to do with the eye, and the cinema has to do with the eye, the book has to do with the brain. And so eye and brain are torn asunder. Now, that is, of course, her view, and of course, there would be people who would debate this and would not agree to this. So that she feels, because there's a reason for her to believe this, because she feels that literature is a very vulnerable body. And cinema, with all the support that it has of technology, and you have all those now very, very almost we can't even imagine how the way technology has gone ahead. So these factors, they encroach upon the authenticity of the book. And she goes to the extent of calling it as encroaching parasite. We know what a parasite means. So she has a view, she takes a view of this. And then, she also feels that whereas one has to do with the depth, which is of course the book in this case, the other has to do with the visual. But she has a point here, and she says that the kind of the directors should ensure that they talk about the movie reality, and she feels that since the screen is an extraordinarily powerful medium, it can, or it emerges rather as a very formidable rival to the book. And she goes to the extent of calling it dangerous because it is fully clothed. she says. And why she says so? She says that, because it can say everything before it has. She said it says, the cinema says everything before it has anything to say. So that is something which which she feels that is how cinema has the upper hand. But then she says that the director should take advantage of the expressive capabilities, and that is what she means by filmic. And that is, she suggests that the visuals should be far removed from everyday reality, and that is what she says. What she means by, and she calls it a dream architecture. So these were the views of Virginia Woolf. But coming to the next set of views, which was by Bluestone, and this was all against, almost in opposite to what Virginia Woolf said, that he felt that the film should be freed from any perceived obligation towards fidelity, and because it is an art form, it's an art form. And so in this study, which was titled Novels into Films, which came out in 1957. So his arguments, were basically around this, that there is a need to free the film from any perceived obligation towards fidelity. Why should there be a question of fidelity? And film it's an artwork. And if it is an artwork, then any art has the right, to express itself and to explore the possibilities. So he felt clearly that it should not be, closed in that garb of fidelity. So and then of course each medium is different, and therefore what he felt that the visual medium has its own, way to approach a text and to present itself. So coming to and these are all views, which have been appearing on the scene ever since. There's this debate about how, the question of how true cinema should be to literature. So there's another filmmaker, author of this book called Novel to Film, which came out in 1996. Brian McFarlane, he believes in metamorphosis. I mean, we all know that what the changes, the transmutation that happens from, when the characters and the story moves from one expression to another. So there is the question of metamorphosis, there's the question of intertextuality, and also some kind of deconstruction that takes place in that process. So, he has a very, kind of an expression that he uses from the domain of the moral, terminology. He says that fidelity is very desirable in marriage, but in adaptations, he says that I think they should be allowed that freedom. The cinema should be allowed that freedom. So going a little bit, continuing with the theme of fidelity. So ultimately, what we as readers, we as cinema goers, we probably, so many of us would also be well aware of how a film should be appreciated, what we call film appreciation. So thematic fidelity, and there are there can be two kind of fidelity: thematic fidelity and story fidelity. So what is important? So that is where the critics and the filmmakers, they all agree more or less on the fact that thematic fidelity and not story fidelity is important. And that is where, even another critic comes in, Linda Hashian, she says that adaptation's pleasurable palimpsestousness. Now, palimpsest is something, which can be reused. And that is what she means, when she says that it's not, even if the story was, became a part of a book. So it doesn't mean that same story cannot be reproduced in another way. So this also means that the audience should be able to uh, relish the familiar, which has already been, they have read in some other format, but the other format can present itself in a very, very fresh manner, and that can be enjoyed. So why not? It's a possibility. So that is talking about the thematic, the difference between the thematic and fidelity and the story fidelity. So ultimately, stories are very flexible things. I mean, it's not that if one writer has taken up a story and given it beautiful language and the description and the phrases, the kind of language that we all love to read. Obviously, I mean, that we cannot, because cinema is a different medium. We would not go to the theater to listen to long descriptions, the character just sitting maybe on a bench and saying something for about an hour or so. No, in fact, it happened. One of the instances when a particular movie, a book was made into a movie, and everything possible was probably taken into that movie. So the movie, it said that it ran to close to 9.5 hours. So it can be as preposterous, of course. That's an extreme case, but yes. So what important is that the medium should be able to give the right message. It should color that the kind of the theme, and it should give the characters the nuance which is expressed. Maybe if the director is is taking the book as a guide in whatever little way, so that will certainly come into some form or the other, and the movie will remain pretty close to the source. So it is for those who would like their the book to be to keep close to the cinema to be keep close to the book. So now what happens? Why do the directors like to take something which already exists in books? So of course it's a very simple thing to believe that they get ready-made plots. They would not like to make something out of nothing, no ex nihilo, out of nothing. And then it is an advantage because audience are familiar with the story, so it is easy for them to get into the imagination of people, and they don't have to try hard to make the viewers understand what lies beyond this. I mean, some kind of background readiness is there, and obviously, and if you go by the statistics, you'll find that these are highly dependable. The adaptations are highly dependable because that they have this it entails less risk to investors, and there have been statistics where 20 out of 14 out of 20 um, movies in a particular time frame were adapted. So that is something. And then these the directors, they also, and the script writers obviously, they also cater to genre specific productions. It's a love story, suppose. Now, for example, in the case of Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, with the young uh, hero and the heroine, they they there's a movie, and then that's so liked by the audience that it almost paved the way for more young adult movies. So similarly, when we have these books which are very, very bankable, um, coming say to amounting to almost 20 30% of the the entire number of films that were adapted. Nearly, I mean, as I said, there was I mean, it's rather glaring that 14 out of 20 were adapted in 2000, I think 15 or something like that. So they were even television adaptations. They are highly adapted, and once again they are able to generate that interest, many manifold interest. So this what happens now when the during this transposition, and what are those factors in this process? No one, we all know that there is a plot which is there in the story, with the book. Then the plot is sometimes twisted, is sometimes taken as it is. Then the characters, the cast ensemble has to be very, very appropriate. Then this element of narration is there. Then there is a historical context. Now we all know that all good books have been adapted in different countries to their own socio-historical context. We also have movies being made in not only in India but Bengal. Bengal has a very, very rich culture of film adaptations. So then what else comes in? The cinematographic techniques to create the atmosphere. Then the enunciation. Now when the characters are there, how do they speak? How do they act? What is the kind of the direction that is taking place? And then of course the role of the lights and cameras, the long shots and the close-ups. Then the kind of symbolic relationships, which as I said can be, which plays a very, very significant role in mainly realist movies and some art movies, or some maybe it's of course a very vital charm of it lies in the animation films as well. So those all these juxtaposition between men, women, good and bad, so they are all very visual factors. Now what happens when, or what changes in that whole process? Now there's for example, there is in this book, I just kind of compared. Suppose there is a sentence in the book, and I've taken this sentence from Pride and Prejudice. There's a dialogue when there's a sentence in the book. It says, "And turning round, he," that is Darcy, "looked for a moment at Elizabeth, till catching her eye, he withdrew his own and coldly said, 'She is tolerable.'" Now we all know how interesting this book Pride and Prejudice is. Now what happens when the same book is adapted to cinema? What happens on screen? What do you want? I mean, of course, this is one sentence just written in a book, and when it is there on the screen, how many things are needed? You need actors, you need a location, you need a setting, you need an atmosphere, there are properties, then there has to be camera, the position of the camera, the angle movement, long and close shots, and if some music, if there is. Now, and if it is a dialogue, there has to be intonation, there is the timbre, the quality of the tone, and then the speed of delivery and pauses. So you can imagine how many things have to be kept in mind when this adaptation happens into cinema. And believe me, if you see this movie, Pride and Prejudice, you will find it is, the kind of expression that Darcy has given. We know that he's a very proud man, and you look at the expression on the face of this man all along, that will describe this one sentence very, very graphically. So any good adaptation will keep the atmosphere of the book. That is important. And the idea is that whatever the book is suggesting, because if it is it's an original source, I get, this is my view, that the director should keep keep intact that the essence of that atmosphere, and maybe it intensifies. It should be intensified. The emotion should be intensified by all these other dimensions of a movie. So of course we have these images, we have the visuals, and we have sounds. All these things help to enhance the source material. So and of course a lot depends on who is watching. So that subjective component is always there. So what happens now? This is just a brief run through some questions which you may have, like to keep in mind, or maybe they cross your mind when you watch an adapted version of a book. So, is the original work complete basis of a film adaptation, or it's just inspiration? Now, this is very, very significant because we can't judge a work simply because by saying that it doesn't adhere to this original source. So there can be, this is what we have to understand, that whether it is a complete basis of that adaptation or just an inspiration. So most of the time you'll find that the films are inspired. I mean, it's also mentioned, in their credits. And whether this is important, that the novel or any story or any art form should come to life through the film. Is it coming to life through the film? Then of course the film is a success. And what do we experience first? That is again very important. Whether we have read the book first or whether we have gone to watch the movie first, that makes a lot of difference, believe me. And you will experiment, by watching, doing either way. And then, do we really adhere to this adaptation purism, or do we have to be adaptation purists? So these are certain questions that maybe we like to ponder upon. Now, there are some adaptations which are very, very common, as you can see. Jurassic Park was a film made in 1990 for the science fiction by Christian, and the movie which was made by Steven Spielberg in 1993. So this movie was adapted into a blockbuster film, and of course it had a sequel which came out in 1996 or 97. So this is a case of where people generally found the movie better. So obviously, I mean, you can imagine when there is talk about dinosaurs, there was so much of action. So people, obviously the book little, has this disadvantage, and the movie, did very well. So and moreover, the director Spielberg gave a lot of depth to the characters. And the second book, which the example, is that of the girl on the train, where the book is better. The experience of people who have watched the movie would say that the book was probably better. So another, when it comes to third book, The Princess Bride, where of course it was a 1973 fantasy romance novel by Goldman, and the movie was equally good. Similarly, with this very, very iconic book, The English Patient by Odanche. So the movie as well as the book were equally good. So these are certain instances where on the one hand you find the source was better, the other the movie was better, and in certain cases both the movie and the movie was, I think, came up to the expectations of the readers who really liked the book. Now, these are again two examples which I picked up. One is Godfather, which is an iconic, again, a 1969 novel by Mario Puzo, and of course, this was about a real time, kind of a mafia family, which was made into 3 films. It was a kind of a series, 3 crime films, which were directed by Coppola, and one was in 1972, then 1974, and then 1990. The third one did not do pretty well, that well as the first 2 ones. And then, of course, in this particular picture, you find El Pacino. All these are actors we would love to see on screen, and then Marlon Brando. So the son, Michael El Pacino, enacted that role, and Don Vito was enacted by Brando. So these are films that we would like to go and watch again and again. Uh, then we have this. The I gave you this example of 2005 Pride and Prejudice production, where you see even in this picture, if you can see closely, the expression on the face of Darcy. So this was a kind of a movie which was changed a little bit from the original source, in the sense the kind of the Regency world was um, not depicted in its entirety. Instead, some more things were added in addition to the original ones. So these are certain deviations which the directors do as per the requirements, in the sense that there are so many factors. The audience is there, the socio historic culture, the culture, the factor is there. Then the certain ideology of the director himself, or maybe some ideology which is there in the book, which he would like to agree or not agree with. So all these factors do come into do play a very important role. And yeah, now you can see this very again. I really love this shot by from Slumdog Millionaire. It was an adaptation of Q&A, and then of course you have. I just again randomly selected these movies like Devdas, of course, which was made thrice, and initially, of course, the first one was by Bimal Roy. It was based on Chalit Chandra Chattopadhyay's um, novel, and then you have this Chetan Bhagat's Three Idiots. These are very random examples. Why I pick these random examples? And Harry Potter, of course, because these they have they have actually gone across to the audience, and they have become, they are in their own category, in their own genre. They are their own standards. And now we come to quickly take a quick look at the Shakespeare adaptations. Now, no one in the history of literature been adapted so many times and for so many years. Now, if you look at the some the kind of data that goes with Shakespeare, you have his writers. It's been 400 years. He was born in 16. He died in 1616. Born in 1564. So the writers have been writing on him, about him, for 400 odd years. Movie makers have been making movies with his plays, adapting his plays for last 120 years. And there have been 400 film adaptations. There have been 250 Hollywood films alone in Hollywood based on his plays. So, and of course, the first movie. I mean, there's just now I think 2 minute movie is in the record of whatever the archives and all. The 1899 production of King John. So that was a British production, and that is the first known film which is based on Shakespeare's play. And the first sound movie came about in 1929, which was Taming of the Shrew. And when it comes to Hamlet, which is the best known play of Shakespeare, nearly 100 movie and TV adaptations have been made since it was first made in 1920, I guess, or maybe it's still earlier. And the range that you have Shakespeare, you have him in every possible country. Wherever there are readers of Shakespeare, you have Russian Hamlet, you have Russian Lear, you have Japanese Macbeth, you have Japanese Lear. So and of course you have in India Vishal Bhardwaj done a wonderful job with his three tragedies. And then you have in Kerala. There's something which speaks highly about Indian kind of abilities of the writers and directors. Jayaraj, he produced two adaptations of Shakespeare's plays, and in Malayali. One was Antony and Cleopatra. It was called Kanaki, and on the other one was based on Othello. And this Antony and Cleopatra is a very interesting, description that you read, that you have Cleopatra, whose this character is a kind of she becomes a folkloric woman who deals, magic and and all those, the way Cleopatra is associated with the poison and the snakes, etc. So they are, it's a kind of a well received production. Now, when you come to talk about these various ways, various countries, various situations, and the different kinds of sensibilities that govern the adaptations, regarding Shakespeare, Shakespeare is not an easy dramatist. His work is complex. So whenever you read a Shakespeare play and you see the production, you every time. And I'm glad I have watched so many productions of Shakespeare, and they're all by such, whatever we of course we end up watching, they are by good directors most of the time, and they have done absolutely wonderful job. So if you just have a look at this, how different ways Hamlet has been, and how different times Hamlet has been um, produced, right from 1920. You have this Laurence Olivier, you have Mel Gibson playing, you have Kenneth Branagh playing, and then you have also Ethan Hawke playing Hamlet. You have our own, Haider, made by Vishal Bharadwaj, Shahid Kapoor playing Hamlet. And if you if you watch these productions, each one will tell you a different story, because they are situated. Each one of them is situated in a different context, right from the original word-to-word BBC productions. Of course, they have Laurence Olivier very close to the text. Kenneth Branagh followed the text very, very closely. That's why it's a very, very long film. And then you have, in fact, Ethan Hawke, who was, made. It was made to attract the, the modern audience. So these are some of the. I'll just quickly let you see the a few more movies that are adapted, that are based on Shakespeare's plays. You see the huge number. Like this is one, again a range of movies on Othello. You have all possible. You have a Black Othello originally. Then you have, of course, Orson Welles playing a wonderful Othello. You have he did Macbeth very, very beautifully. Then of course the movie, relatively newer movie. You have Omkara. I don't know how many of you have watched Omkara. It is a marvel. It's a marvel, and it speaks volumes about the potential of any good work of literature, any good book. And of course, it depends so much upon the director and the scriptwriter. So. Yeah, and then a few more, examples. For example, King Lear. King Lear, you have enormous, because the emotions are so strong in this play that wherever, whichever way they are adapted, the Russian filmmaker Kazintsev changed the daughters to sons. So these, and then of course, Ran. Ran is a supreme example of adaptation. I think if you list out the adaptations of Shakespeare, Ran will be on top, and that is why I have just put you know the one shot from the movie solely on the screen, just to tell you. You look at this one shot, one image, and it speaks. I mean, those who are familiar with the story of the plot of King Lear, you find how beautifully the book has been adapted by Akira Kurosawa, the Japanese director. So, Macbeth, again, we have, besides all these Western productions, Akira Kurosawa, Throne of Blood stands out. Then you have Polanski, you have You have our own Maqbool by Vishal Bharadwaj. So all these are different productions, and each one, as I said, is a gem, and must try to. And it's always it's a very great experience to watch all these movies and then compare with the original work. Not for that, not to know how much they have kept the story or the plot intact, just to know what are the possibilities. So cinema has this huge possibility, and that is what we have to look at when we really do film appreciation seriously. Um, and then, of course, some of the biopics, some true stories, life stories, which have been made into movies from autobiographies like Stephen Hawking's, and this biography of Ramanujan. Then you have MS Dhoni, and then you have Lakshmi Bai, made into movies in India. And then, of course, you have this beautiful movie from by Chris Gardner, Happiness. And I really like the spelling of happiness here, the pursuit of happiness. So this is the creativity. This is all creative, energy of the directors, the script writers who adapt. They read. I mean, it's a very tedious task. Whoever is adapting the work will read not only the text, not only the one text by that author. I'm sure would be doing so much of research, and that is what pays, in the end. So then you have the whole lot of Disney films, which are enjoyed by old and young alike, and there's no end to mentioning the names of these Disney movies. And then, of course, when we talk of all these examples that we saw as movies being made based on the books, how successful are they, or what makes them successful, or what makes them not so successful, or maybe failures. So that is that's one thing which is very, very commonly noticed, that either the book is going to be very good, the movie is going to be very good or very bad. There can be mid opinions as well, but why it happens that the film is not liked by the viewers? So one reason could be that it lacks creative vision, because if it is taken as it is from the pages of the book, it will probably lose its freshness. The kind of fresh energy will not be there. And obviously, I mean, there are scenes which are loved by us when we read the book, because beautiful language is there. I mean, language, those who really, like reading good language, probably, I think the problem is mainly with them, because they do not like, like to miss all those nuances which is hidden in those beautiful lines, beautiful expressions. So, yeah, it's always an exciting thing to view cinema. And I'll end this presentation with these, the kind of comment by Kazintsev, the Russian filmmaker, who says that influence in art is not only the result of one artist learning from another. It is the threads of the twisting spiral of history, the continuity of life, where old contradictions develop new forms, and new generations ask once again the age-old and very simple question: what does man live for? So very, very elementary question, very fundamental question. And if we were to reply to this, what does man live for? We can have our own answers to this, that yes, we live for being happy. We live for being entertained. We live for being, caring for others, knowing what, not exactly caring, but knowing, understanding human beings better, understanding others' conditions better. And what better way to know this through the medium of both literature and cinema. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for acquainting us about the nuances of the topic in details. Now, ma'am, we have few questions which the
Yes.
participants have put up. So, shall we start with this?
Yes.
Yeah. The first question is it necessary to reclaim the authenticity while adapting a book into a movie?
See, this is what I talked about in in my the last few minutes. That
Yes.
authenticity is not very important in the sense, so long as the spirit, that the thematic fidelity, not the story fidelity. So that is something important. If the the person who is adapting the book into a cinema feels that the certain things in the book should be changed because my conditions, my viewers would not probably be able to appreciate them, or they might appreciate things differently in a different context. Now, suppose I'll give you the example of Hamlet. Now, Hamlet is a prince of Denmark, and most of you would know the plot of Hamlet. His father is killed by his uncle, and his mother marries his uncle. Now both are the king and the queen. Now this man, Hamlet, is a young prince. He's a he has several questions. I mean, this play is not easy. It's a highly philosophical play. Now what happens? I'll not go into depth much deep into the story of Hamlet, but I'll just bring you to this example of Heather, which was made by Vishal Bhardwaj. And where is, if you remember, who is Heather? Is in the film is Shahid Kapoor. And Shahid Kapoor, what is the position of Shahid Kapoor? He's a son of a person, of course, who is in Kashmir. I mean, the movie is set in Kashmir. So you can see from Denmark, where the original play is set, the movie is set in Kashmir. And the culture, it talks, everything, changes accordingly. But the movie remains in spirit, close to that, to the book. So authenticity is, it is appreciable if it suits the audience, and it gives the confidence, to the filmmaker, that what he is going to present to his audience is something which he firmly believes in, and which would be appreciated, and would keep the soul of the book to an extent intact.
And the
Is-
next question, hello.
yes, please go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, the next question is, what are the major theories of English literature which can be referred in the adaptations? Some of the like
Yes.
theories
uh,
of literature.
Right. See, theories of literature is full of this literary criticism. You read all those psychoanalysis, you know, structuralism. You have this kind of post-structuralism. You have materialism. You have Marxist theory. You have post-colonial theory. So there are innumerable ways you can assess, and that's a very very interesting field of study, because every single ma- art work will give you an occasion, a reason to assess in terms of different relations. Suppose there is one person. Now he is, again, we can understand this through another play of Shakespeare, for example, Macbeth. Now, Lady Macbeth, when you want to assess the character of Lady Macbeth, there are so many theories come into picture. There's feminism, there is psychoanalysis, there is something like a Marxist view as well. So all these issues can be. I mean, there is no uh, mm, work which cannot be applied to the theories that are there in the field, in the realm of literature. But it is to be done in a very relevant fashion, I would say. Yeah.
The last question, ma'am. The last one. Do you
Yes.
think Indian cinema has done justice in showing the evils and taboos of Indian society, or has rather remained ignorant and turned towards commercial movies?
Now that's a very 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 tricky question. Not exactly tricky, but it has it can be replied in several in more than one way. Now, when it comes to Indian society, Indian movies, with, if it has, whether cinema, Indian cinema has done justice to the evils or the kind of society that we are. We have several things in society which are probably considered negative. So, this is the hallmark of a good director, a movie maker, a filmmaker, who would bring out these elements, in a very very subtle manner, or if it has been done in a very very direct fashion also. You have these beautiful movies which are based on articles and very very artfully shown. They are very I would say very it takes a lot of courage on the part of the director and also the script writer to talk about to present this kind of content to the audience, but they are appreciated. The movies may not do commercially very well sometimes, but at the same time, I'm sure, whatever few movies I have seen, I feel directors do approach the problems in the society. They have brought out in this in a very very open fashion or in a subtle fashion. But yes, now I think that the trend is to be very direct, and with Netflix and other platforms coming in, you see the kind of bravado that can be seen not only in terms of on the part of the directors but on the part of the actors as well. So I have huge faith in Indian cinema, and it's a kind of it's a I think everybody would appreciate it. And there's certain movies, and let me add one more thing. Certain movies may not be very well known, but when you see them, as part of some festival, amazing, amazing movies. I mean, they're very short ones, but they are feature films, and they touch upon some very significant issues in society. So I would, my request to you all would be to go for meaningful cinema, something which not necessarily always talks about the realities, harsh realities of life, but the cinema which is able to stir your sensibility. That is what is more important.
Thank you, ma'am,
Thank
for
you.
clearing the doubts of the participants with an enriched perspective. I'd like to just inform all once again that we have uploaded the feedback link, and this link has to be uh, filled correctly, because whatever the names that you're going to put in or the email address that you're going to put in, so the same details will be marked in this certificate that you'll get. So please be very much clear and precise with the details that you're going to fill in. Fine. And feedback link will be open today till 11. So try to fill it as soon as the session gets over. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Shilpa Agnes, Assistant Professor, Department of Humanities, for the vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, all. The best and beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt by heart. Thank you is one such. On behalf of Sri Vaishnav Vishwavidyalaya, I, Dr. Shilpa Fitness, take this opportunity to propose words of thanks to those who directly or indirectly contributed to this webinar on adaptation of literature into cinema, organized by Sri Vaishnav Institute of Social Sciences, Humanities and Arts. We express our gratitude to our resource person, Dr. Seema Raizada, for sparing her valuable time with us. We are really enlightened with your knowledge. Your insightful presentation will definitely help our participants to explore this theme more. We are thankful to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Upinder Garg, and respected coordinators Swisha and Dean FDSR, Dr. Santosh Dhar, for all the possible support, encouragement, and guidance to organize such events. We would like to thank Shilpa Shinde for her enthusiastic cooperation. A special thanks to Dr. Anand Rajavat, Director, SVIIT, Mr. Abhishek Sharma, technical support, and organizing committee members of SPESHA who put up their untiring efforts to make this webinar grand success. Last but not the least, we would like to thank our participants, without whose participation and involvement no such event is complete. Many more such lectures are coming back to back. We will keep you updated, so stay tuned and connected. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks to all. And now the session has ended. And like Shilpa ma'am said, this is the first lecture series. We have more in line, so stay connected, and we'll be definitely come up with a new topic, and that will definitely enhance our knowledge. For now, thank you.
Thank you very
You all
much.
can log off.